Hello there, welcome back. Now I'm going to talk about two King Arthur films that are not at the top level, is the best way to put it. But I kind of got interested in watching them just over the last week or so. So I'm doing a video on this. So it's the top level for me. The King Arthur film, and I love King Arthur's myth is Excalibur, Lancelot the Lac, and the Holy Grail, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Those are the three different approaches to King Arthur legend all work. Lancelot the Lac is very spare and brutal. Excalibur's a dark romantic version, and the Holy Grail is the hilarious Monty Python, take the Mickey out of it version. It's like they cover so much of the King Arthur situation that's just wonderful. So those are three I just always go back to. The worst one by a mile of the King Arthur movies I've seen is First Night, which is appalling. It's just unwatchable trash. I was pained watching that film, how bad it was. How dare you treat King Arthur this badly? Now, the 2004 version with Clive Owen, directed by Anton Foucault, and The Legend of the Sword, directed by Guy Ritchie, starring Charlie Hunnam, are both in the middle versions. They're not the height of Excalibur or Lancelot Lac, but they're definitely not in the low of First Night. They're kind of a bit below Saw. I think the Disney one, where we were young Arthur, Sword and Stone. It's better than these two, but it's still kind of in the middle ground of the King Arthur movies. They're not amazing, but they're enjoyable in bits. Out of the two, I would say I kind of prefer the 2004 version, but it's just the no more. It's like they both have things that I like and both have things that annoy the hell out of me. But I liked Clive Owen's King Arthur a bit more. Mainly because I think Charlie Hunnam's King Arthur doesn't really become King Arthur until the end. So it's a making of King Arthur story more than anything. In some way, I mean, Clive Owen plays a guy who's a Roman, and he's half Roman, half Britain, and he's in Britain leading the Romans in Britain, because that's a revisionist take on King Arthur. From historians saying the myth came from a Roman general who was here just before the Romans pulled out of Britain, and basically a lot of the elements that became the legends came from him and his knights who were there, and they were fighting a lot of time against the kind of local folk who were, the pagans, and they were the Christians. And then there's also the Saxons who were trying to attack from up north, through up north, basically the Vikings. So that was the myth that basically was being used for this film. So you don't, so no one's exactly how they're remembered in the film, in the myth. So you have a Guinevere who's a warrior. This was early on in the Let's Make Every Actress Sarah Connor clone. This one came quite early compared to some of them. And at least the beat are intelligent in this one rather than an idiot, which does help. You'd King Arthur as a guy torn between duty and the land. Merlin's the leader of the Britons who are rebelling against the Romans. So Arthur and Merlin are at odds for most of the film. The knights have all got names of knights who become important to the King Arthur myth as it goes on, such as Lancelot and a bunch of other ones. So you get a lot of things that are there and the myth being adjusted. You've also got a kind of, it's basically a Roman movie, where Romans try to save people from behind enemy lines, get them back, and then fighting the big enemy. So it is a genre movie within a King Arthur movie, which in some ways is fun, in some ways means you don't actually get the myth you're looking for. So it feels like you're misselling the film in some ways, because I don't think the script balanced everything out very well. That's a polite way. The guy who wrote it wrote Gladiator, but he wrote the early drafts Gladiator, I think. I'm not sure. It's like there's so many drafts of Gladiator, and it's like who did what. But the script has lots of problems. But the actors try and push through. The actors in this one really are pushing through some dodgy dialogue. There's some really dodgy dialogue in this film that's, you know, I was watching the director's cut, but there's lots of things in there where they repeat and they repeat and they repeat. And you think, I've heard this before. I've heard this one before. Don't you have any new dialogue, any new ideas? And there is that sense of repetition in the film that does not help it at all. It's the worst part of the film ultimately, because it's like you're stopping the film to have these dodgy scenes that are not that well written. And no matter what they do, the actors can only do so much with cliched parts and dialogue that isn't up to snuff. But the general situation is interesting, as long as you look at it as it's a King Arthur movie that's trying to revise a bit and trying to do a different version of it. It's not trying to be the definite King Arthur movie, it's trying to be a different version of the myth. And it kind of succeeds in a lot of ways because it remembers to be a genre movie within the King Arthur myth. And it's a rescue movie behind enemy lines with a crack team of. It's a man in a mission movie for most of its running time. And that's enjoyable. So even though the feel with the speeches, and especially for Jerry Bruckheimer, and there's so many music cues that come from Armageddon in this film, believe it or not, and it's just got that kind of overblown thing. The score does not match the film at all. The score is the thing that they need to change in this film to really help it. It feels way too modern, and it's trying to be timeless, but it comes across as modern, too modern, and it just doesn't really fit, and it always pulls you out to try to get into the film. So that's kind of the problem. But the film itself has an amazing cast, and that's the thing that keeps this film afloat. Is the cast is astonishingly good. You have Clive Owen as King Arthur, and he's playing him as a. Clive Owen plays kind of more gruff characters, but there is a romanticism to him as well, and he plays both those elements really well. It's not his best performance because he's got some dodgy material, but he's giving it his all. And he's playing a guy who's really torn, and he really works at the part. You've got Ewan Griffith, I can't pronounce his name, as Lancelot. He's okay. He's fine. I think that part could have been cast better because he doesn't pop the way that other actors pop in the film. And he feels like the weakest link. But the parts of the weakest link is I'm not sure what to do with Lancelot. And they make the big mistake of killing him off at the end when the film's trying to set up, like, there's more stories of this version of King Arthur to go. And most of them shouldn't. The point where they're getting to is where Lancelot would become a major part of the film, major part of that story, and he's dead. And it's like, that's stupid. I have no idea what they were thinking. Maybe they didn't like the performance either. Who knows? Maybe they were like, oh, he does not work as his part. Let's just kill him and replace him with another Lancelot later on. Who knows? But the other part with Hugh Dancy and Mads Mikkelsen, both from Hannibal before. So this is the first film together before they did Hannibal. So it's quite funny to watch them together. Ray Winston as the boorish boss, who's a lot of fun. He's hamming up like crazy, and you always want him on screen because he's so much fun. Joe Edgerton as one of the other knights whose name you never remember, but he's having a ball too. I mean, all the actors. Ray Stevenson as the guy who's got the big axe and who's sentimental below the gruff exterior. You know, that cliche, but he plays it well. It's like everybody in the film who's one of the knights are all like way overqualified for the parts they've got, and they're all seem to be enjoying each other's company, and there is a sense of this is the best part of the film because these actors know how to play this material. So even if the material is not amazing, they can make it work. And it just works. Whenever they on screen together, whenever they're interacting in an action scene, it's always enjoyable. Whenever that group's together, the film's always enjoyable. The film always works with that group. When you have Arthur alone, we're giving speeches, sometimes you wish you just cut that scene and just let go back to the group because the group's working better. Keira Knightley as Guinevere works as well too, because she start when she's freed by Arthur because she's been arrested by this weirdo Roman guy, and then she proves herself to be worth a good fighter, and she becomes a link between Arthur and Merlin when they realise they've both got a common enemy in the Saxons. And it all just works quite nicely. The Merlin's good. You wish he was more Merlinish, but they'll try to do a realistic thing here. So, but all that thing works quite nicely. It's not amazing, but it's well done. Stellan Skarsgård as the villain was having a lot of fun. Playing a guy who's no redeeming features. And he just wants someone who's worth fighting, and he will destroy the land to try and find someone. And when he finds Arthur's worth fighting, he's like so happy. He's a useless son who does everything wrong. So they've all the parts work out well. There was some good action stuff. There's some nice bits with them. They're traveling back and forth to this fort to save this guy who's not worth saving. But his son is the one they really want because he could be they think he could be a new pope at some point. So they're trying to. That doesn't really make sense. Why would this important guy be behind enemy lines in the first place? But you just go with it because that's the plot of the movie, so it doesn't matter. So all that stuff does work, even with the some of the bizarre plotting to get them there. It all kind of works. Men in a mission, meet up with other people on the way. They lose one or two other people, and then in the end, they basically once they've got home, they have to do that big fight at the end as well. Where they'll lose one or two more other people. It's basically a man in a mission movie, and it works as that. It's just that if you're looking for more than mythic King Arthur, you're not going to get it. And you have to put up with some of this bizarre, some of the weak speeches and the score, but it's still enjoyable for a B movie kind of actioner. Really, that's what it is, but done a bigger budget than anybody needs. So, but I should say that Centurion Neil Marshall did a couple of years later with Michael Fassbender did a better job of this kind of material with far less money. So it can be done a lot better, is what I'm saying. Now we're going to Legend of the Sword, the recent extravaganza by Guy Ritchie that was a massive bomb on release. It had been reshot and hacked about a lot before the release. It was one of those films that was kind of abandoned well before it can get out. And everyone knew that it didn't work before it came out. Everyone knew it was getting dumped. It was like, try to do some of this film, we cannot get it to work. It's just some films are like that. I mean, there's like they hired good people, they had a decent subject matter, and they just still can't get it to work. And there was some reasons for that. I mean, I think one of the big things was if the 2004 King Arthur was so focused on it was so heavily influenced by Gladiator that it became an unhealthy influence. And this one is an unhealthy influence by the Lord of the Rings movies, and there's even a rip-off of the giant elephants that attack early on. This idea of magic and magicians on the land, and a malign magic influence all over the land that a hero has to stop. It's very Lord of the Rings. And it becomes this thing where the film doesn't have its own identity when they're doing those scenes because it feels like another film. So Jude Law plays the black-hearted villain who is the brother of Uther Pendragon, whose name I always mispronounce, played here by Eric Bana, who's in it for 10 minutes. And you wish he was in it more. He should have been the villain. He would have been a much better villain because Jude Law doesn't look suited to this part. He's trying too hard. So there's that issue. and a little did look like a good actor on certain things, but in this one, he just feels like he's not a good fit. And it's like you had someone in the film who could have done it better, who you killed off. It's very annoying because it's just one of the things they switched those two over, and they would have been a much better setup. So that, and that's the part of the film that kind of is just weakest. It's just like he's not a good villain, and he's the one potential thing they've got with him is to power up so he can become this super villain thing briefly to defeat his enemies, no matter how strong they are. He has to kill a loved one and to sacrifice this person to these underworld creatures. So after the first time he kills his wife, and the second time when Arthur comes emerges, he kills his daughter, and you're just waiting for him to kill his daughter the whole film. It's like there's no suspense here, but it's not done in a fun way where you're actually been playful with it or anything. It just does not work. The King Arthur section works a lot better. It's messy as hell how they get from A to B. At all times, it is messy, but it's the characters are decently cast. Like Charlie Hunnam has fun as King Arthur. It's not the most amazing thing he's ever done, but he knows what is needed in the film, and even though he's working sometimes with not the best dialogue, because Guy Ritchie's a hand in dialogue, and sometimes his dialogue can be tone deaf. He's more energetic as a director than as a writer, but Hunnam knows how to do the style of it, so it's fun, and he keeps it going throughout all the scenes where he's learned to become the new king, and it's very Robin Hoodish, where he has to lead these outlaws who are against this awful person who's running the land, and it's basically Robin Hood. King Arthur's Robin Hood for most of the film. Merlin doesn't show up at all in the film. There's a other mage who's this magic person who was meant to be Guinevere, but they cut it at a certain point because apparently the prompts didn't work for the romantic stuff. So she just became this supernatural creature. And suddenly, when you find out she was meant to be Guinevere, and then makes much more sense now because Arthur has to rescue her at a certain point, and that leads to defeat the villain. And but if she's just some nobody rather than Guinevere, it's much less impact. So there are things like that they refashion as they went, and there was Arthur trying to learn how to what was he scared of in his past that's stopping him from using his full power. Excalibur can do lots and lots of cool stuff that basically means that Arthur's overpowered whenever he uses this sword, which means basically the suspense goes down a little bit. So that Ritchie has to rely on fast cutting and fun sequences rather than suspense, because both Arthur and the villain are overpowered when it comes to normal people. So there is that problem. But at least with the Arthur character, he's learning as he goes. He doesn't really become overpowered till pretty much the end, or close to the end. There's a lot of Cockney stuff, a lot of Guy Ritchie Cockney stuff of the working class people against the rich. But that kind of works fine for what it is. I mean, it's a ridiculous reinvention of it, but if you look at any kind of action movie that looks at myth, there's always reinventions of this. It's like there'll be another one in 10 years that's completely different and different style. Who cares? It's just this reinvention. It's just a very messy film. And again, they have a villain problem is the main thing. It just feels like the film has been rewritten and rewritten. And it doesn't have a spine that really works. It just has lots of things thrown at the screen, hoping it works. And it tends to work better when it's, again, it was when you were Arthur and his group of, comrades in arms as they're digging up to stuff to try and defeat the villain. That's when it works best. And that's when it's enjoyable. And there is a sense of, even with the loud, kind of wide voice of Cockney, there's not any misogyny in the film. Is quite nice. It's like all the women characters are pretty strong. It's not really that, and King Arthur just he really does have to kind of learn to deal with his own weaknesses to actually succeed, rather than being a big macho guy or something. He has to learn to deal with where he's weakest at and learn from that to actually succeed. It's not like getting in touch with his feminine side or anything. It's just like learning to deal with his emotions in a coherent way. So the film works quite nicely. It's not like the most amazing thing ever, but again, it's enjoyable. It's an enjoyable B movie and an A movie budget. It's that kind of thing. Both these films have is like they're both overproduced, way overproduced, and lots of sequences they didn't need. And they both needed more cohesion in the script, and they needed the directors to focus and have a few budget cuts to focus clearly. But they work for what they are. They're fun. So I hope you enjoy them if you go see them. Right, that's me for now. Right. Okay, bye.